right, so let's get started. So today I would like to talk about caring about our API partners developer experience. So my name is Paul. I am part of the API developer experience team. So it makes sense that I will talk about API developer experience. So first, I would like to talk about why it is important. Okay, so first, it is important because the API is a key component of the Criteo strategy. We want to open the market to new clients, to new partners, and so it makes total sense to provide a good developer experience so that it's easier to use and that more clients want to use the API. Also, as a big tech company, Criteo must provide a good developer experience, and otherwise it will reflect the Criteo's reputation. And then, of course, if we provide a good developer experience, we will be able to to reduce our support costs because it will be easier for developers to use the API and they will not need us for this. Okay, so let me introduce you to Mark. So Mark is a developer as part of a big retailer, and his boss just asked him to integrate Criteo's API into their analytics tool. And that's it. And so we will follow Mark into his journey to integrate Criteo's API into the tool. So what about Mark's journey? So first, Mark, of course, will have to read the documentation of Criteo API. Then he will get started. He will try to make the first calls to try to understand how to authenticate these calls, how to get credentials, etc. Then he will start exploring the API, understanding how it works and what can he do with it, how it is designed, etc. The various concepts that are behind this API. And so this is all part of the exploration step. Then we will get the integration step. So we will see how Mark can use some tools that we provide to ease its integration. And then, of course, because nothing is perfect, there will be some maintenance about it, and we will see how we can help him maintain his code, his application, by providing some tools and some tips for him. Okay, why is it problem? Okay, all right. So let's talk first about our documentation that we provide. What will Mark do? Of course, he doesn't know the Criteo API. So of course, he will start by typing Criteo API into Google. So let's do this. And the first link that he will be able to find is the Criteo developers link. That is actually a link to the documentation portal. He will arrive on this page. So he will see first a link to get started, which will redirect him to another portal that I will discuss more about it later. And also he will be able to find other few links for the documentation. So as you may know, the API is split between different Criteo services. So the retail media Criteo service and the marketing solutions one. And so as Mark is working for a retailer, he will need the retail media link, the documentation. And so he will arrive to this page. So he will quickly understand that the documentation is divided into different sections. So one for the introduction, another one to get started. We will come to that later. One for different concepts that are behind the API, some resources that he can use, and then the documentation of each endpoint that is split between the resources, different resources. Okay, so that's mainly it for the API. So for the introduction, we can see some introduction pages that are very light, and another one that explains that our API is version. We can also see that by so we can see that we are on the documentation for the version 2022.10, but we will come to that later. Okay. So then Mark. So yeah, that's it. And so Mark will get started. Mark would like now to be able to make the first calls using a client to use the API to understand how to use it. So he remembers that on the documentation, he saw a link that he can use to get started. So let's click on this link, and it will redirect us to the partners portal, which is another portal that we provide to the developers. And this portal is used to actually create an organization. So Mark will first have to create a developer account, and then he will be able to log into the portal and see this page. So this page is for creating an organization. So this organization will be probably linked to his company, so the retailer company. And once this will be done, he will be able to create an application. An application is the consumer of the API. So we don't, at Criteo, the API is not consumed by human user, but by applications. And that's what he will have to create then. But I will not go deeper in the details because there is other presentation for this. I will just add them to the PowerPoint later. Yes. All right. So Mark has created an application. He now know how to get some credentials, and with these credentials, he will be able to make his very first call and to explore the API. So he also remembers that on the documentation portal, he saw another link to access a resource that could be very useful for him. So this link is actually a Postman collection that is already prepared for him, so that he doesn't have to create the whole collection for the API. He can just use it as is. So for the sake of the demonstration, I already have forked the collection, but it is available here if you want. So I've already created a fork of it this morning, and so the collection is available here. I can use it in my Postman program, and I will also have first to create a token to use these endpoints, and that's what I'm going to do now. So as I saw the documentation, I know that I will have to provide a client ID and a client secret in the body of the auth token endpoint, so that I can get my token and start using the API. So let's make a request. Let's refresh my access token. And then I can make my first call to the actual API. And so, for example, this one. So here, for example, we get the list of the advertisers that the application has access to. So why does the application has access to these advertisers? Is because we granted, so the retailer granted some consent for this application. He gave the access of those advertisers. And so this consent workflow is also available on the third and last portal that we own, that is the consent portal. And that's it. So that's it. Now, Mark is able to create, to make some calls, but he would like to dive a bit into some concepts before starting to implement the API, to understand how it works and how it is designed. So there is a whole section for this on the documentation. And so, for example, he can understand how we design our endpoints, the path, the URL of our endpoints. So first, he can see that each endpoint will start with the version that he is using and the Criteo service. So here, retail media. And then he will understand the patterns that the Criteo API is using to create his endpoints. So for example, the most common one is if you would like to access, to create an entity, you will have to provide its parent. So for example, if I want to create an application, I would like to provide its organization, its ID, and the application keyword. Yeah, and so that's it. That's mainly it for understanding the pattern. But yeah, there is also important concepts that are, for example, the whole list of endpoints, so that Mark can identify the endpoints that he will have to use quickly, the format of the response that he could use. So for example, like this, he can understand that there is always a consistent way to get the response of the API. So he will always get a data field, an error field that I hope will be empty, but if there is some errors, it will be fed in the array of the errors properties, and it will always have the same format as a problem detail. And also the entities that will be returned on the endpoint, they can be a collection or just a single entity, but they will also have the same format. So the type, the ID of the entity, and its attributes. And then another important concept that you can find documented is that our API is rate limited, which means that he will not be able to spam our API indefinitely. He will only be able to make 250 calls per minute, which should be enough. And there is also some nice tips to avoid getting rate limited. Okay, sorry for this. Right. Okay. All right. So now let's talk about integration. So now that Mark knows how the API works, he will be able to integrate the API. So to actually use it in his code, in his application. But Mark has an idea. Mark remembers that he saw some resources that could be useful to ease its integration. And by resources, I mean public SDKs. So we provide SDKs in different languages, the Java language, Python, and PHP. And so as Mark is a Java developer, he would like to use the Java SDK. So he will click on the link that he found on the documentation, and he will arrive to the Sonatype website describing the package. He sees that he can access the source code that is hosted in a GitHub repository. And that's very cool for him, because he knows that if there is some issues with the SDK, he will be able to easily investigate what is wrong, and, for example, to provide an issue or even a pull request on the GitHub repository itself, so that we can get pinged and find a solution quickly. So Mark is happy. He found an SDK that has the quality he needed to integrate the API. So he can integrate it easily. His job is done. Mark can go back to bed. But as we all know, it's most of the time it's not that easy, and something breaks. And so now let's talk about maintenance. So here we also provide some tips, some tools that can be useful for Mark. So the first one I would like to talk about is error handling. So as you already saw, we provide the errors that Mark can find in a standard format that is always the same. And so here, for example, Mark got woken up because someone from the marketing team has an error, the application wasn't working properly, he has to investigate, he managed to reproduce the bug, and he figures out very easily, thanks to the error response that we provide, that actually it's a bad usage of the API. So thanks to this, he can easily create a fix on its side, just a validation gate before actually calling the API, to make sure that the start date is not older than the end date. And also, he figures out that it was quite painful to investigate this issue, because he had to reproduce it, etc. So he decides to implement some monitoring on its side. And thanks to the common error format that we provide, he can directly return, for example, some important information for him, like the description of the error, so that he can very quickly understand what's going wrong and find a solution even more quickly. So Mark is happy. He found the bug. He implemented some monitoring. Mark can go back to bed. But of course, it's not that easy. Another issue comes up a few weeks later. Something else broke. So he checks, he got pinged, and he can find the error quickly. And now it seems a bit more weird. Like he doesn't really know what happened, and he thinks that it's not on his side. It's an internal server error. Something may going wrong with the API itself. So first, as he read the documentation, he knows that there is a status portal that he can check to make sure that the API is actually in a good shape right now and that nothing is going wrong. And he sees that, okay, it's not the issue, the API seems to go well, but I have an internal server error. So as every every partner that is using the Criteo API, he has a point of contact at Criteo that he can contact to get some information about his issues, some help. And so he decided to contact his point of contact and to provide him the trace ID that he has on the response. Thanks to this trace ID, someone from the support team will be easily able to investigate and to find the solution quickly. And so that's it. So thanks to this, Mark has solutions quickly. He's really happy because he got all the support he needed to find a solution. Even if it was painful to get an error that was not on his side, he felt supported and he knows that he can rely on Criteo to help with his issues. And so Mark is happy and Mark can go back to bed. But one last time, something happened, and Mark has to go out of bed one more time. I will not tell you why right now, but first I would like to talk a bit about versioning. So as you may know, our API is versioned, which means that the endpoints that some partners are using may not live forever. A version lives by default only for a year. And after this, the version is going out of support, which means that if partners keep using those endpoints, they will not get supported. It's on their side. And at this moment, actually, Mark is using an endpoint on the 22.10 version, so the current latest version that we provide of the API. But let's say in 2023-1, we update the endpoint that Mark is using by introducing a breaking change, something that if Mark was using this endpoint would break its integration. So if at this point it was the case, then it means that everything would break. And so the endpoint of Mark is still working. It will still work for 9 months because we are only in 2023-1. The endpoint in 2022-10 will still live for 9 months. And so it didn't break. It means that we are only 3 months after. So what did woken up our friend Mark? It's an email, actually. So now I would like to talk about versioning communication. We send emails to our partners that are using endpoints that will be at some point decommissioned, which means that if they receive an email, they still have some time to migrate to a latest version and to fix their issues. And thanks to this, nothing breaks. So an email looks a bit exactly like this. So we send a message to say that we strongly advise him to migrate to the newest version with a link to this version and to the documentation of this version, and also the list of endpoints that should be migrated with other metadata about their usage, etc. And so thanks to this, Mark knows that something will be wrong at some point, but everything is fine. He has plenty of time to migrate. So he decides to migrate now, and everything is perfect. Mark is happy. Mark can go back to bed, and this time for good. And thanks to this, you can find whenever you want our usage and if there is some stuff, some endpoints that you should migrate. And so that's it for Mark. So, but I think that we can still improve the API. And so I would like to talk finally about what can we do more, what's next. So first, we would like to improve the consistency of the API. So I already said that our endpoints had the same patterns, the same formats, was quite consistent, even the response, etc. But it's not totally true. We can still improve it, and that's actually one of the roles of the guild API, API guild, sorry. And our job as API developer experience members is to provide the tools to ease this process, to ease the visualization of the overall API. And so that's what we are currently working on. Also, we would like to work next year on more and better SDKs. So what I mean by more is in more languages. So we would like to support as well JavaScript, TypeScript, and C#. And also better SDKs because we could always improve the quality of our SDKs. And I think that there is some work that we can make as well on it. Also, we would like to refine the portal's UX. Right now, it's not very intuitive for a newcomer, someone that just arrived and would like to use the Criteo API, to understand why does he have to create an organization? What OAuth workflow should he use? Why? What is actually an application? What is it doing? And so this could be improved by actually refining the UX of the portals. And so it's another objective that we have for next year. Also, we would like to provide more metrics for monitoring. So by monitoring, I don't mean internal monitoring, so Grafana metrics, etc. But actually errors, metrics that we can provide to our partners, such as, for example, the versioning, their usage, the versioning communication that we provide. And there is some other stuff other metrics that we could provide. It's not already the case, but it's another objective that we have. And then, and last, we would like to improve the overall performance of the API. So this is a continuous improvement, not really an objective that we have to deliver, but it's also part of our goals of every day because we provide some SDKs for developers of API as Criteo, and we must keep in mind that the APIs have to be important, have to be performance, and so we need to improve, for example, the response time, the consistency, the availability, etc. And that's it.